Is there any questions? Anything you guys want to ask? Here's your chance. Everyone's always saying it's so hard to get a hold of people who make decisions in this city. There you go. Here you go, guys. Got any questions? Okay, I'm going to let you think about it for a sec, but I want you guys to come up with some questions. I have some questions for you guys. One of the questions I have is, you talked about, there's people who make a difference and they have social capital, and that was a total aha moment for me of how people can build social capital. I think you said that really well. Wow, I'm going to think about that later. Why do you think not everyone puts their hands up? Like, what do you think is the biggest barrier? I know you say, you want to get asked, but what else is it besides getting asked that people say, yeah, you know what, I just don't want to go and do that today? Like, what do you think it is? Maybe from all the panelists, you could just have a quick answer of what you think the biggest barrier is to get people to just volunteer.
Yeah, for some people, it's not a cultural piece, right? There are people who come from cultures that are heavily driven by family. So family looks after each other, and it only extends to that circle. So there's that part. And what I would say, cultural, you could be in Calgary and not have that. That's a potential, right? So part of it, I think, is leadership. It's demonstration. It's seeing it in action. And what I find really remarkable about stories that we saw today and other stories that we've told over the years is how people who are beneficiaries of someone else's gift of time then in turn say, I didn't know, like that person changed for me, particularly I'm thinking stories around new Canadians and working with established Canadians to help them navigate the community and like welcome them and help them sort of navigate the systems and the structure. They in turn do that for others. So that's why I think that it's actually about demonstrating that. People need to see it.
I would say, a lot of it comes down to the sharing of stories. And I think that people are inspired when they know what others are doing. And I think it's through inspiration, it's through having an idea of how do I get involved and where do I get involved and what does that look like and what will that feel like. And I think that it becomes a habit more than anything, and just it becomes a part of who you are and how you live your life within our community. So I think it's through having those experiences, and as you do so, you start to build up that social capital that Jamie was talking about, and you get further and more involved in other opportunities. But it really starts with someone sharing a story and inspiring you to do something, as simple as that.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because around Goodpin we've been really talking a lot about the fact that decreasingly people are giving to organizations. What people do is give to people, and they give to those stories. What are people? We're sharing stories all the time. We're sharing our own stories. We're living our stories. We're sharing them on social media. We're sharing them individually. And the more you share stories, the more you invite people into your stories, the more I think you'll see those opportunities and increase in volunteerism and giving, because people give to people, not to organizations.
The reason from a youth standpoint, what the research tells us as well is that children are motivated and inspired to give back with time because their families do it and because their teachers and schools encourage it. And so when you start to see now things like Calgary Board of Education embedding things like social general character development as a report card item, right? We start to become, like, we're now talking institutional. That's like we as a whole community are valuing so much that as part of your reading, writing, arithmetic stuff, you're actually general character development, right? These systems, religious systems, cultural systems, these are things that teach us. And what we see in Calgary, I have great hope for the future in terms of our continued rate of volunteerism, because the two fastest population growing segments in Calgary are 55 plus and 0 to 14. So that 0 to 14 segment is looking at the schools, the teachers, and the parents who are actively volunteering and being inspired by that. So this whole wave of youth that's coming up, this fast growing population segment, is going to be volunteering because they're seeing that modeled.
What do you guys think about that? Like, you guys are a super quiet audience. I don't know. Oh, here goes someone. Someone's going to break her open. Thank you.
You just touched on the growing baby boomer population, and as I was hearing each of you speak, I'm really excited about all the opportunities that young people have to get engaged. I think it's just a different mindset. I think technology is allowing them to give in the moment and share those stories over social media, but I'm thinking about my parents and my parents' friends who really are still seeking purpose in their lives. They may live for another 30, 40, God knows however many years. And frankly, I need to put them to work. So get out of my kitchen and go volunteer. But they don't have access, or they do, but they're not using technology to connect with those opportunities. They lose their social capital when they leave the workplace that they may have been a part of for 30 years. How do you think we're going to reach that demographic and engage them in a meaningful way?
I'll talk from a Propella standpoint. The way that we really support volunteerism in the community, because I talked about the number one reason why people volunteer, but the number one reason why they stop volunteering is because they had a crap experience, which generally means you've wasted their time. I mean, if you're paying someone, they'll sit there all day. You can waste my time and I'll play solitaire, right? Fine. But if I'm choosing, giving you my discretionary time, you can't waste it. So what we do is we train our member organizations on best practices in volunteer engagement. So we try to make sure that they're giving a really good quality experience to their volunteers. But I think that it's really fascinating to me that business right now is spending billions of dollars to research employee engagement. It's the big idea. And they could actually look at volunteer research for a lot of information, because what their research is showing is what we've already known about volunteerism for a long time, is people want autonomy and they want meaningful work, right? That's what they're looking for. So I think that we need to be, our organizations who can really take advantage of the skills of older adults, and so they need to target them. Where are they? Are they socializing? Where are they getting information? Are they watching television? Are they reading the newspaper? They have to figure out where those audiences are and go to them. That really becomes the work of organizations who are looking to volunteer.
And I think it's about following their passions. And I think it's around connecting with other people who are passionate about similar things. What I saw through the video earlier was people that were looking within their own local communities around what needed to change and what skills and what knowledge they were able to bring to make that change. And it was around, I would call those all passion projects in terms of how those individuals gave back to their local communities. And I think it is around acknowledging that and finding pockets of where their interests are and where they actually want to get involved.
I can only speak from personal experience, and I don't know anybody 0 to 14. I do know a lot of people who are boomers, and my friends tell me that they want to volunteer, but they don't want to stuff envelopes. They don't want to drive people to appointments. I mean, it's not that that's not valuable, but what their attitude is, I'm a retired senior executive. I can do many high-value things. I can help you with your business plan. I can help you with financing. I can help you even with IT, things like that. So that there's not, what they see is there's not a match between what they have to offer and what people looking for volunteers are offering them to do. And I think they want to make a difference, and they want to make a difference using their skills.
There's lots of discussion in the volunteer community, those people who make a profession of working in that space, that we should dump the word volunteer. There's lots of baggage to that word, and talk more about civic or community engagement. Because when we use the word volunteer, people typically talk about what you're talking about, Brian, which is traditional or direct service, hands volunteering. I'm going to drive somebody, I'm going to pick up trash, I'm going to, do something, I'm going to work at the gift shop at the hospital, those sorts of things. Thinking about being a skills-based volunteer and actually being an IT consultant to someone, or a strategy consultant, essentially, is what you are. For example, at Propellus, our director of IT is a skills-based volunteer, and he's the director of IT at an energy company working downtown. We don't need that skill set in the office 40 hours a week, but we do need it from a governance, from a policy perspective, from a project planning perspective. Those sorts of things is very helpful. So we work to teach organizations on new and innovative ways to make sure that they're engaging volunteers how they want to be engaged. But what I would say, if you have people who are looking for that, to Danny's point, pick a cause. Do you care about animals? Do you care animal welfare? Do you care about the environment? Do you care about children, education, literacy? Find those things. Find organizations that you think are doing good work and go to them and say, this is what I can do. How could you use that? And we know that people actually, there's a level which you have to have enough structure for people, but they also want to actually self-define what their role is. So really, it's about taking the initiative to do that.
And I think from a corporate standpoint, one of the interesting systemic changes that's happening right now is, especially for your parents, and I would put myself in that category of probably around your parents' era there, that the corporation used to provide all these things for them. So the corporation used to do the family picnics, and the corporation used to say, you're going to be employed here for 30 years, and we're going to offer you some really great volunteer opportunities. We're going to organize all that for you and bring it to you as the employee. And what we're finding at TELUS with our new hires, the millennials, the future, is they're coming to us with what they want to do. So there's a whole shift that isn't going to happen in the next generation, but it's a bit of a gap in the generation you're talking about, where we're not used to you're finding opportunities. We're used to them being presented to us and then choosing. So I think it's a real mind shift that there is going to be a slight gap in that generation where we maybe have to do a better job as the charitable sector and going out and reaching that specific generation, knowing that the future generations aren't going to have that issue. They're used to coming and saying, this is what I want to do. This is how I see it all unfolding. I think you're right, though. I think there's a real shift there that's happened.
All right. So my heart is also racing, similar to yours, Jamie. But I want to share a story with you, and this is, on the power of stories. And recently, I was in the, on the citizenship ceremony of one of my friends, and the judge spoke some words that I will never forget. She said, volunteering is the Canadian way. And I think I will never forget that. And I would argue that, volunteering is not only the Canadian way, it's the human way. And I think that it's fair to assume that all of the people here in this room, you guys are active community people, really engaged in, in our society. And I think that the challenge here is for us, for all of us, and this, challenge I want to put to all of you, to create a new generation of people who are going to be the new volunteers, the new change makers, because probably some of you or all of us are doing that already, and now we need to create the next generation of change makers and volunteers.
Hi, I'm Karen with Social Venture Partners, and I wanted to just speak to the baby boomer question. And we at Social Venture Partners have recognized that, so I'm going to give you a bit of a pitch. We've launched a brand new program called the Encore Fellowship Program, and it's an opportunity for baby boomers to be paid interns in nonprofit organizations so they can gain experience in the nonprofit sector and see where they might fit in that time after they retire but aren't quite done yet. So they're paid a stipend by the nonprofit organization and then work on a project that has huge capacity and meaning for the nonprofit organization. So there's my pitch if you want to talk to me.
Hi, just building on some of the things that have been said. I'm from the Silver Linings Foundation, a newly formed nonprofit, and I've used Propellus both looking for volunteer positions to get involved in, and now for seeking those volunteers to assist me in my nonprofit. And what I'd like to see, and it's just building on some of the things said, passion and your interest, whether it be dogs or whatever, is one thing, but then addressing what this gentleman also said, volunteers very much want to use their skill set. And what I'd like is there to be a tool or vehicle by which, kind of like your dating thing, the volunteer, not just by area of interest, but skill set, can plunk that in. And then rather than navigate that humongous, like where am I, and find that there's just so many. And similarly, the nonprofit. And then there's this matching, which just makes it a lot more efficient in your chance of finding a good fit, much better.
Thank you. I'm trying to remember what categories are under the advanced search. and it can be by role. I know there's stuff around board. There's also yychelps.ca as another opportunity for finding volunteer opportunities. Getinvolved.ca for Volunteer Canada, and Go Volunteer, which is Alberta, Volunteer Alberta, and Vantage Point out of British Columbia. So there's lots of opportunities to find the path, and thanks for that feedback on search options.
I think that's a really good opportunity, though, because I think one thing that happens in the volunteer sector that's a little bit different than the funding sector, say, is that's been something we've needed for a long time. You know, every session we're in, someone will stand up and say, is there a way to get people connected, right? And no one steps up to do it. You know what I mean? Like, I think it was Jamie that said, this is your city, you're the soul of the city, this is what you guys want. And I would challenge everyone, including myself, to say, you know what? I've said this 60 million times. I'm going to work with Jay, who's super smart, and we're going to totally nerd out and get this thing done. And it might not be awesome, but it's going to be a start. Like, I think that's one of the things that the sector really needs to stand up. Corporate, volunteer, government, everyone needs to just stand up and say, I'm going to do that. Because that's what all these people in the front row did. You know, I bet you the folks sitting in the playground saying, we're going to use this rink for a scooter park. How many people told you that was never going to happen, that was ridiculous, and what, you know, oh yeah, it's a good idea, but it's not going to happen, right? Like, who's going to fund that? What about the liability? There's a million reasons why not, but these people in the front here are examples of why, how they got it done. So it's a matter of just figuring out, you know, not could somebody develop this for us. Here's some people who basically saw an opportunity, and I mean, a water well to do gardening. That's amazing. What a great idea. How many people said to you, what? You want to do what? Right? She's like, yeah. So I think the thing is, we all have to take some responsibility as citizens and say, you know what? I'm going to do that. I'm going to start it. I'm going to try it. I'm going to figure it out. Because it's not always up to someone else to figure it out for you. And I think that's one of the key learnings I try and teach my kids, and they all look at me and, you know, I think some of it's going in, but I'm not 100% sure, is you own some of this. It's not just me. No one gave me a parent guide. I'm trying to figure it out with you. So we're all in it together. And I think that's one of the things, like, to take away.
It's interesting, and from an economics perspective, you know, one of the principles of economic thinking is scarcity, right? And then also that something has a specific amount of utility that gets used up, and then it's done, right? You've used all the oil in the jar, you've whatever, all the gas in the tank. Things like love, trust, respect, those are things that never run out. And in fact, the more you use them, the bigger they get. And I think that sense of community engagement is one of those things. All of you guys that worked on those community projects, right? Like, what you got from that grew, and every difficult situation, hitting a water line, right? Like, that tested those things, but you pulled together and made that happen anyway. So the constant use of those things actually grows it and doesn't deplete it. And ultimately, I think that's the unquantifiable part of engaging in the community, right? When you walk down that street in Inglewood and say, wow, I sat on a committee and I helped to organize this, and now there's thousands of people enjoying an experience, that's something great to connect to.
And I think there's a commercial piece to it too that we forget. We think, oh, no one's going to pay to get matched up with a volunteer organization, but I bet you $50 your parents would pay for that. Because to them, you know what? They want to find something meaningful and interesting. So I think it's really important for us to not lose sight of the fact that there is a commercial side to this discussion, and that it's okay for that to be there. That there are pieces that likely could become a really interesting social entrepreneurship model of finding and building these kind of dating services for high skills volunteer that people are likely willing to pay for.
It's not so much a question as a comment. As one of the participants and recipients of the project, I just wanted to say that the discussion about volunteerism is quite interesting, because we're all volunteers here who put our time and our effort to go in and do these projects, but we didn't do them alone. We're just the ones who got to be in the video. You know, there was communities behind us. There were other volunteer organizations that we had to bring in to get the work done. For example, for us, Youth Central helped quite a bit with a lot of our work. There was mention of the art group for the mural project. And so this was such a multi-layered active engagement, I guess, is what I would say, right from Calgary Economic Development down to, you know, the kids who were holding signs for us. So just kudos to everybody involved.
There's time, it looks like there's time for one more question. There's one up there. You know, you guys should check out, just while we're waiting for the mic to go down, you should check out that video of the dancer guy at the Seattle Music Festival. What is that? Just Google Dancer Music Festival. And do you know what it is? Sorry? Start a movement. And it's amazing how one person dances by themselves and they're dancing there for a while looking pretty goofy, and then you know, after a while, which seems really awkward, another person comes and now there's two awkward kind of weird people dancing. But then you time it from that second awkward person to the third person, and then all of a sudden there's 5 people that join, and all of a sudden there's 20, and it's a proven model that it's hard to make the first step and the second step, but the third person's key, and then it's easy. And I think that's probably what you guys as volunteers figured out, that once you get to that third person, all of a sudden it becomes easier to get the 4th, 5th, and so on. So always keep that in mind, that the first 3 people are tough, the rest come right away, like easier.
The Gorge Music Festival.
Thank you, Gorge Music Festival. Look it up, it's worth the 10 seconds you'll watch it, and it's quite funny too.
Yeah.
Okay, hi. My name is Christine. I work with Calgary Arts Development, and I have a question for the panel. There's a bit of a preamble, so bear with me. Last week, I was at a conference that was all about collective impact, and they shared a tool during this conference that I really liked called network mapping, which is where you sort of map all the people in your network. You know, so every person is a node, and then there's a line from their node to another node of a person who they know or someone they work with or whatever. And that, you know, in most networks, you see sort of like a big cluster of people who all have tons of connections, and all these nodes are connected. And so, you know, like you guys on the panel, you'd all be connected to 1 million people, and you'd be part of this big, thick web in the middle. And then you have these outliers to the network who probably just have one connection going into it. And they were saying, you know, well, as you build your network, you've got to help those people get more connected so they become part of the big web. But then you also have to ensure that you're always bringing in new outliers who didn't have any connections to begin with. And Jamie, I think you touched on this when you talked about people who have barriers in terms of getting involved, whether it's language or being new to the city and so on. And I was just wondering if you 3, because I think that sort of idea of network applies to volunteerism, it applies to donors as well. You see the same people donate to everything. I'm just wondering if you've seen any really interesting examples or things that were really efficient in bringing in new people and making those first connections into a larger network. Yeah, that's my question.
Cool. In Goodpin, actually that's precisely the power that we're trying to tap into, is the power of people and the people that they know. We're essentially a social network that focuses on good, much like LinkedIn focuses on career. We're a social network that focuses on people that want to do good and make good things happen in the world. So that's precisely what we're tapping into, and we see that every day. And the power, it comes back to the power of story. The better the stories are that are floating out there, the more it engages your network and the more reach it has as well. And the more chance that it can sort of break beyond the typical boundaries of those people that you say give all the time. You might get the outliers increasingly as you tell better stories and more engaging stories. That's what we're seeing every day.
I would say, you know, there's so many different examples of how you go about that, and I think it really depends on the type of project and the type of opportunities. But I think the simplest way that I've seen is people actually just making that ask. And it's, you know, that's usually, it sounds like the simplest, but it's probably the most difficult piece about it. And it's about going, you know, oftentimes our social circles are, you know, whether it's around interest, whether it's around, you know, where you work or what you're doing, but it might be going next door, and that might be the person that you don't know as well. It might be about, you know, understanding your own community in a different way, or it might be understanding that person that, you know, you ride the bus with every single day. I think it's about taking some of those simple actions and transforming them into a conversation, and through those conversations, getting other people involved.
I just would give a shout out for Networks to say that all three of us are actually alumni of the Leadership Calgary program. And it's an amazing community leadership program, started about 15 years ago. It's not a traditional leadership program. It's really about wise and responsible action and how do you know what it means to do good, to do things well, those sorts of things. So highly recommend that program. A little shout out for that. But just to your, I thought of it because of your question around the network. And the whole point of that program when they originated it 15 years ago was to build a network of people who think about building community. And so that actually has become almost 500 people in the city that have been through that program in the last 15 years. And there's other alumni in the room.
Any last thoughts on the panel? I've given the wrap it up kind of thing. So if you guys have questions, feel free to come up to the panel and talk to them. They're going to stay here till 10, so you know they'll be here. So feel free to do that. Any last thoughts, you guys? No? I think that, you know what the thing is that people always say to me, well, how do I go meet a community investment person? Because they're so hard to get a hold of or whatever. I think the thing is everyone's just everyone. You know what I mean? Like, everyone can we've all got times when we're super annoying to other people, and we've got times when we're super charming, and they always come at awkward times, and it's never the way you want it to be. If you just go up to someone and say, hey, you know what, I'd love to talk to you about this and that, and just kind of be authentic and just reach out to them, I'll tell you what, 99% of the time, you're going to come away, walking away going, I'm glad I did that. 1% of the time you'll go, wow, that was really bad, I'm not doing that again. But the 99% you will, and I think it's just getting over that fear of like, well, what if they say no? Who cares if they say no? Like we've been told no so many times, it's like, yeah, okay, move on to the next person. That's the thing about, like, I find that's a really interesting question because people always talk to us about, how do I get to know this person? How do I get to know that person? Just go do it. Don't even think about it. Don't even, you know, like you walk out of the house some days, you haven't even looked in the mirror. Same thing. Just go. Do it. And just move on, because you're going to find that really, really works. And it sounds so basic, but it works. So I'd say just give that a go as far as networks. It works. So thanks, everyone. I'm supposed to wrap up and say something really interesting, but I don't really have anything because I'm so inspired by what I saw that I'm just like, I'm amazed and inspired. And I feel like I want to go dig a well somewhere and do something interesting, because all I do is shovel snow for people, you know, and grumble the whole way through. But I'm so inspired by you guys and the folks who are teaching like young kids how to voice themselves in a different language. To me, I've been there. I know what it's like. It's brutal. You're talking in baby language, it feels like. So I'm so inspired by you guys and by everyone here. We can all make a difference. Small things make a difference. I got that really well. And Brian, thank you so much for coming all the way here. We know you want to stay. We know you really do. You want to move to Calgary. I think you live in Hamilton or Ottawa?
Ottawa.
Ottawa. So unfortunately, Brian lives in Ottawa and he wants to move here. So we welcome you to shed your Ottawa self and move to Calgary.